الله أكبر الله أكبر.
Over 1400 years ago, the angel Jibreel alayhi salam descended from the heavens to the world with a message for a person named Muhammad sallallahu alayhi wasallam. In the cave of Hira, it was at that time when the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam was granted a mission and a task. The task was to stand up, warn the people, and show people the straight path. Reintroduce people to the oneness, power, might, and glory of Allah. The mission was to show people the path to paradise and to set an example of being subservient and dutiful to the Creator rather than being subject to one's own lust and desires. The message that the Prophet ﷺ set out with was heard by many, but accepted by few. The task was resisted by many, but supported by a few. The idea was rejected by many and embraced by a few. For those few in the early age of Islam who did embrace, it was the message that they were moved by. The message of oneness, Tawheed. To reject polytheism, to speak the truth, to respect the elderly, to show mercy and affection to the young ones, to love your neighbor, to help the needy, to cease from all acts that are immoral and unjust, to stop bloodshed, to be fair with one another. A message about respect for one another, to not slander a chaste woman. This message, when accepted, it created a bond among them that was stronger than steel and closer than blood. It was a bond that saw no boundaries or colors, an alliance that saw no backgrounds or status. It was a tie that unified the rich and poor, the young and old. When the Prophet ﷺ came with this message, it was at a time when all of the opposites of that message were rampant and flourishing. So those few men of understanding, for the few humble and unpretentious, this message, it clicked to them. They found their inner peace and solace in between the lines of the message of revelation. They found the path being left behind with each step that the Prophet ﷺ took. And although the followers of the Prophet ﷺ, the Sahaba, the companions, although apparently they were feeble and fragile, and they were a minority, with the gusts of resistance and ignorance blowing straight in their face. In spite of all of that, they stood their ground, hand in hand, and they did not let any force, any opposition, or any resistance break their stride. It was the power of this message that brought them together. It was the power of this message that strengthened their souls. It was the force of this message that brought each and every single strand, fiber, filament, and hair together to form a strong rope. And although that rope was beaten down at times, it could never be cut and eliminated. After a decade of being pushed around, after over a decade of being persecuted and emotionally and physically tortured, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala granted permission to the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam and his followers to move to Medina. Why Medina? Because throughout the years, during the season of Hajj, when people from Medina, they came towards Mecca for their Hajj, they were introduced this message by the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam. And Allah allowed it to click in their minds and in their hearts. In the message that the Prophet ﷺ shared with them, not only did they see a path to paradise, but they found a platform for themselves to live in peace and harmony in this world as well. The city of Medina and its people, for over 200 years, were the victims of a civil war. And because of that, it left the city itself in much neglect and disrepair. The tribes of Aus and Khazraj, they were at each other's necks for this whole time. When they heard about this message, they found their peace and solace in it. And they welcomed the Prophet ﷺ with open hearts and open minds and open arms. This was the stage in the life of Islam when Islam made huge strides, when the message flourished and blossomed like never before. This is when many milestones were accomplished and many goals were achieved. What contributed to all of this? What contributed to the blossoming and the flourishing of the message brought down by Jibreel alayhi salam? One of the first things that the Prophet ﷺ did when he came to the city of Mecca was to lay down the foundation of a community. Now, how was that foundation laid down? There is no doubt that the Prophet ﷺ designated a place for worship. But that place designated for worship in nature was very shabby and humble. The slogan of the Prophet ﷺ since the time he entered Medina was Afshu salam wa at'imu at-ta'am wa sallu bil-layli wan-nasu niyam tadkhulul jannata bisalam. The Prophet ﷺ's slogan was spread salam, spread the greetings, spread peace, and feed the people. And pray at night while others are asleep. Tadkhulul jannata bisalam. You will enter the gates of paradise in peace and serenity. It is all about spreading the peace, my brothers. Spreading the peace, my sisters. The foundation of this religion is peace. Peace and solace. Inner peace and outer peace. And peace with one another. And peace with your sister. Peace with your brother. Salam. This is what this religion is all about. And this message of peace, it was so strongly infused into the community that the Prophet ﷺ was establishing. Again and again, the Prophet ﷺ kept on reminding them of the peace and the brotherhood. He established a brotherhood, a sisterhood, a familyhood, if you will. I don't even think that's a right word in English, but you know what I mean. He established a familyhood. Everyone from Mecca that moved to Medina was known as the Muhajirin, and the people who were already living in Medina were known as the Ansar. The Ansar welcomed these Muhajirin into their lives better than most blood could do today. They halved their lands and properties. They divided their wealth, and some couples mutually even discontinued their second marriage so that their brother can start a family in this new city. When this was the state of familyhood, look at how much they got done. In the city of Medina, how much did they get accomplished? This happened because they put all of their differences aside and they stood under one flag and one banner, and that was the banner of the Ummah. Were there issues amongst the Sahaba? Yes, there were. Were there quarrels and arguments? You bet they were. Did they have difference of opinions and views? Sure, and why not? They were human beings in the blood and flesh that we are in, with the same substance. But there was something different about them. There was something different between them and us. They had eyes just like us, but they had better vision. They had ears just like us, but the Sahaba had better attention. They had mouths and tongues just like us, but they had better communication. They had hearts just like us, but not just to pump blood and oxygen through the body. They had hearts that pumped love and affection through every inch in their body. They had hands just like us, but they had a better grasp on things. They had feet just like us, but better footing. They had their differences, but they knew how to deal with it and move on and move forward. They had their affiliations and their associations, but their lives did not revolve around it. They did not beat the drums pivoting around their associations and affiliations. See, one thing we have to clearly understand about our religion: Islam did not do away with nationality. It did not eliminate backgrounds. Islam did not do away with affiliations to a tribe or association to a group. Think about what I mentioned a few minutes ago about the Sahaba. The Sahaba radiallahu anhu were in two categories: the Muhajirin and the Ansar. And these were two distinctive, clear-cut groups amongst the Sahaba. But in spite of this, they both together were still one nation, under God, indivisible, and you fill in the rest. They respected one another. They worked side by side. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says in the Quran, وَاعْتَصِمُوا بِحَبْلِ اللَّهِ جَمِيعًا. Hold strong to the rope of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, each and every single one of you. وَلَا تَفَرَّقُوا. And do not set up divides. And Allah tells the Sahaba, وَاذْكُرُوا نِعْمَةَ اللَّهِ عَلَيْكُمْ إِذْ كُنْتُمْ أَعْدَاءً فَأَلَّفَ بَيْنَ قُلُوبِكُمْ. Remember the times that when you were on each other's throats, when you were harsh enemies for one another. فَأَلَّفَ بَيْنَ قُلُوبِكُمْ. And Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala collected your hearts. أَلَّفَ يُؤَلِّفُ تَأْلِيفُ. Allah collected your hearts. Allah brought everyone on one page. فَأَصْبَحْتُمْ بِنِعْمَتِهِ إِخْوَانًا. And it was through His favor that you became brothers. وَكُنْتُمْ عَلَى شَفَا حُفْرَةٍ مِّنَ النَّارِ. You were at the edge of falling into the fire of hell. You were at the edge of the pit. فَأَنْقَذَكُمْ مِنْهَا. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala saved you from that. Aus and Khazraj, these two tribes in Medina that I was talking about, they were at each other's necks and throats for 2 centuries. constant bloodshed and killing one another, destruction of the city. So much neglect that the city of Medina barely had a clean supply of water when the Muhajirin came. Why? Because over 2 centuries ago, the camel from one of the tribes trespassed into the pasture of another tribe and grazed. Let the games begin. 2 centuries. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is reminding them, remember the time, remember Allah's blessing when you were at each other's necks, فَأَلَّفَ بَيْنَ قُلُوبِكُمْ. And Allah brought you on one page. Allah brought you together. So it's about working together as one unit, as an ummah. If you're from Egypt, there's nothing you can do to change about that. If you are Desi, deal with it. If you are from Bosnia, so be it. These backgrounds and nationalities that we share, this is a reflection of Islam's beauty. And this reflection is the most manifest in the Haramain and in all the countries in the West, where you can have people from so many walks of life, from every color of the spectrum, under one roof, praying together, bowing their heads down before Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. So Islam doesn't do away with nationality and backgrounds. What Islam does want done away with is nationalism and chauvinism and racism and discrimination and the extreme devotion to one's background that causes divides and division in a community. Just like the Sahaba who found their inner peace and solace in the message presented to them by the Prophet ﷺ, we need to also find our inner peace and solace in this message. We need to start being a part of the bigger picture, the brotherhood, the sisterhood, or the familyhood, if you will. وَاعْتَصِمُوا بِحَبْلِ اللَّهِ جَمِيعًا وَلَا تَفَرَّقُوا. Hold on to the rope of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Not the strands, fibers, and strings of our countries. Not the locks of our languages. Death doesn't care about our background, about what language we speak. Death only cares for one thing. Who's next? That's all death cares about. It is such a shame that the thing that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala created to showcase His qudra, to showcase His power and might, can be so misunderstood and so misconstrued and can cause the destruction of our unity, especially in this world that we are living in today. وَلَا تَتَفَرَّقُوا. Do not set up divides. Allah did not say do not be different. He didn't tell us not to be different. He told us not to set up divides. Because being different is being unique. Imagine if there was 1 million of us just like me, who dressed like me, who walked, talked, and acted like me. Ay, ay, ay. That would be something hard to live with. وَلَا تَتَفَرَّقُوا. Do not set up a divide. If you go back in history, with the exception of a few, most of the divide that we see today in the Muslim Ummah is not even 100 or so years ago. Some colonialist who killed our fathers, who stole the dignity and modesty of many women, took out a map and started drawing lines. And people in this ummah are stupid enough to define themselves with the lines that were drawn by others. And today we are 65 countries. كُلُّ حِزْبٍ بِمَا لَدَيْهِمْ فَرِحُونَ. We are so proud of being Pakistani or Indian, of being Jordanian or from Morocco. And it doesn't stop there. The problem is, it doesn't stop with just cutting everything up in 65 pieces. There are divisions within the country limits. There are divisions within the city limits. There are divisions within the village. I don't think you would call it village limits, but with village fence, which cause hindrances in marriage. Oh, he's not from my village. Our horses did not drink from the same well, or whatever. And this is all shaitan at work. How old is Pakistan or Bangladesh? What was all of this 100, 150 years ago? And what there is to be proud of, that's a whole nother can of worms. And this is not the platform for that. If there is any government, any leader, any society, any community, any city to be proud of, it is the city, community, and society that was established by the bare hands of our Prophet ﷺ, the city of Medina. Why so much emphasis? Because if we can sit down for a second and move beyond our differences and find common ground, we can get a lot done. And we cannot be defeated. United we stand, and divided we fall. Nu'man ibn Bashir radiallahu anhu shares a hadith of the Prophet sallallahu alayhi wasallam, and he says, مَثَلُ الْمُؤْمِنِينَ فِي تَوَادِهِمْ وَتَرَاحُمِهِمْ وَتَعَاطُفِهِمْ مَثَلُ الْجَسَدِ. The example of this ummah in its mutual affection and love and mercy for one another, it's like the example of a body. إِذَا اشْتَكَى مِنْهُ عُضْوٌ. When one limb of that body is in pain, the whole body responds with restlessness and fever. Imagine you had a toothache. Imagine you had a toothache. Oh, that's not my problem, that's my mouth's problem. It doesn't work like that. It's your whole body's problem. Your hand will answer the call by doing this. And then your eyes will answer the call by not closing at night. You'll be in pain. Your feet will answer by walking around the living room in frustration. It's not just the problem of your mouth. Your feet will take you to the table where your phone is. Your hand will pick up the phone. It will Google Brother Najjar's clinic to find out where the when his hours are. The tongue will talk somehow and schedule an appointment. The feet, the hands, your whole body will drive you there. The whole body will become restless. A toothache is not the problem of your mouth or your tooth. It is the problem of the whole body. You get the point. How upset do we feel when we hear about drone strikes on innocent families in Pakistan? How upset do we feel when we hear about bombardment in Syria? How upset do we feel when we hear about Muslims being slaughtered in Bangladesh? When lands being taken and possessed away from people in Palestine and throughout the world, not to exclude any country. All of the injustice, poverty, corruption, and hunger that is going on throughout the Muslim ummah. How upset do we feel? This is a question of our iman. This is something that we need to work on. We need to be one body. You can take a piece of paper and tear it up. But take a ream of paper and try to rip that. So brothers and sisters, this is a very sensitive topic. But it needs to be addressed. Even in this day and age. Even in America, even in the melting pot, this needs to be addressed. So when we leave here today, let's get off these high horses of nationality, of boasting about our background, and be a part of the bigger picture. فَسَوْفَ تَرَى إِذَا انْكَشَفَ الْغُبَارُ أَفَرَسٌ تَحْتَ رِجْلِكَ أَمْ حِمَارٌ. When the dust settles, then you will find out if you're riding a horse or if you're riding a donkey. When death comes, nothing matters. So let's work together to put our differences behind, stop talking about where we are from, and let's start talking about where we are going. أقول قولي هذا وأستغفر الله لي ولكم ولسائر المسلمين فاستغفروه إنه هو الغفور الرحيم.